Now take on commandments. Rule number uno, never let no one know how much coin you hold, cause you know the Bitcoin breed. Jealousy, especially if that man messed up, then listen back when you told him to buy up. Number two, never let him know your next move. Don't you know coin hang moves in silence and violence? Take it from rigor. The bought mad coins before these other cats stacked their chips up. Number three, never trust nobody. Your competition will set that ass up properly. Gassed up from props to plots for that fast luck. They be lurking in the chats, waiting like that ass up. Number four, I know you heard this before. Diversify when you store your whole supply. Number five, never mind no crypto where you rest at. I don't care if they want to hash. Tell them you ain't got no dash. Number six, that goddamn credit. Daddy, you think a crypto head paying you back after they get wrecked? Shit, forget it. Seven, this move is so underrated. Keep your cold storage and exchange it. It's completely separated. Number eight, never keep no electronics on you. The airport cats love to pat you down and steal your laptop too. Number nine should have been number one to me. If you ain't getting back, stay the fuck from police. If community think you snitching, they ain't trying to listen. They be sitting up to the wait you start hitting. Number 10, a strong word called cadence. Strictly for live men, job for freshmen. Follow these rules, you'll have mad corn to eat up. If not, two life sentences on the wake up. Gotta go, gotta go. More deals to line up. Word up, word up, word up, word up. Number uno, never let no one know how much coin you hold. Cause you know the big coin be jealousy, especially if that man messed up. Then listen back when you told him to buy it. Number two, never let him know your next move. Don't you know coin hang moves in silence and violence? Take it from rigor. The bought mad coins before these other cats back their chips up. Number three, never trust nobody. Your competition will set that ass up properly. Gassed up from props to plots for that fast buck. They be lurking in the chats waiting like that ass. Number one, you never like no one know how much more you hold. Cause you know the big country. Jealousy, especially if that man messed up. Then listen back when you told him to buy it. Number two, never let him know your next move. Don't you know one can't move in silence? All right. What is good?
GM, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Op Talk with me, Bunzi, powered by Arch Network. I think we're just gonna wait until people stroll in, but there's just a lot going on right now. I mean, from a markets perspective, equity markets are back and thriving. Jobs reports looking good. The money printer is burring again, and many people think that Bitcoin and crypto assets will, I guess, be highly impacted to the upside in that regard. So the bull market is very much still on. I'm in big belief that that's the case over the next, 3, 4, 5 years. I think it's going to be a pretty lengthy one. I don't think we're going to have the same levels of euphoria of, way back when, but we can certainly get there. Your bags are up ish, hopefully. But if they're not, then the next unlock definitely will help with that. I mean, for the first little section of the show, I just wanted to talk more about what the trading environment really looks like right now. And yeah, I think the challenge right now is two things really. There's a sniping problem, if you can even call it that. Some people are using that to their advantage with all of the sniping tools, whether it be Goldmine, and others. They're really making it, I guess, easy for people to find in mempool transactions. And I think that's a good point that I kind of wanted to start off with, and it's probably like a controversial one too. Whereas, should anything in the mempool be deemed a transaction that you can acquire and take, in terms of a minor bribe, right? I think the challenge with a lot of people more recently is they can't really get their orders filled, whether it be runes, ordinals, anything of that sort. What is the responsibility of a marketplace supposed to be? Is it supposed to protect your order from an end-to-end perspective? Are we pro sniping, against sniping? Obviously, Saturn and a bunch of other teams are building to solve the marketplace solution. Saturn's mostly focused on fungibles, so runes specifically, and I wanted to maybe just open up the floor to you guys and how you're kind of seeing this, because I think this is a very like hot topic, hot debate where, is anything in the mempool, should that be part of a marketplace in general? Should we think about transactions on Bitcoin in a very different way? Should we think about anything in the mempool as the blocks haven't confirmed as something that, is deemed an open market transaction, or from like a marketplace perspective, should we protect this? And I guess this kind of ties into traditional capital markets too, where you have firms like Citadel and order flow selling that definitely happens. So that then someone can front run your transaction. In traditional capital markets, it's front running for sometimes pennies on a trade, but pennies can mean a lot when you're dealing with multi-million-dollar transactions. But in Bitcoin's case, it's very different. You have mostly, an illiquid market with ordinals and runes, which don't transact at the hundreds or even billions of dollars a day in transaction volume in general. So should we, see Bitcoin as a level playing field? Should everyone have access to sniping tools? Wanted to know more of like how you guys are thinking about it from Saturn's perspective. And I hear you guys are working very closely with Arch as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this time and time again. I think like the old NFT royalties debate kind of kicked this off. And like, I'm a firm believer of like, if it can be done, it will be done. I think any kind of like social policing is incredibly naive. That being said, like, I think it's fair game. Like, I think for a lot of these guys building the tools out to allow for sniping and front running transactions, I think like fair play. Obviously with Saturn, and this wasn't really like so much of an intentional choice. This just happened to be like a byproduct of the design where nothing can be mempool snipe. There's no mev going on. And again, that's just as a byproduct of the way that we've structured it. And until we've got things like Arch, like on mainnet, I don't really know how you can escape that. And I think, yeah, like again, code is law in this industry more than anything. And yeah, I just don't think that we'll be able to police it at all. So you kind of have to work within those confines.
Yeah, it's a strange place because like anything in crypto, no matter the chain, it's not only Bitcoin. It's happened on Ethereum. It seems like the race to zero fees seems to be the most common theme across all chains. Obviously we've had OpenSea, which initially had marketplace fees, and then marketplace fees were driven to zero with Blur, and then creators were obviously doing royalties, and then it just changed the whole dynamic of what NFTs are, right? Because when a creator makes most of his money from the royalty aspect itself, they're basically incentivized to have people trade these assets and trade the artwork itself, and the dynamics and the incentives then just become more in line with what the incentives are for fungible tokens themselves. I think the other part too is we're seeing this world where there's some developers on Solana even, and Meteora and Jupiter and Radium have actually innovated this in that sense where someone can start a token and lock the actual liquidity, but still generate the fees from the trading components to them. So again, that's obviously something that we haven't necessarily explored on Bitcoin, but if you're present on other ecosystems, these dynamics of how you can form the system itself to appeal to various types of creators, be it something like the pump.fund model, which allows you to bootstrap the liquidity, or something like a developer just locking the token supply but keeping all the fees, which can amount to millions of dollars, as we've seen with hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars or billions of dollars in transactions. But it's interesting that Saturn, as I guess as a byproduct of what you guys have built in your first kind of couple versions, was mostly mempool protected transactions. This also actually opens up a really interesting topic, and I mean, I wish Robert from Sapflow was here, because he's basically been monitoring the mempool, and there's a lot of like gamification that you can basically leverage as someone who understands how to move markets. And there's this game almost that people are basically like listing or buying a large batch of ordinals and then canceling their transactions and relisting higher because it just gets the demand going. And I don't want to say that's a fair play strategy. Obviously, it lasts for as long as the market lets it last. But Bitcoin is very different from other chains because of the block times themselves. So we have like sniping, which is net new to Bitcoin. We have these basically transaction cancellations that you can do to, I guess, manipulate volume in any direction you want. And then, we're seeing like people, because we only have an order book right now and not an AMM, and there are some whales that just list a massive supply of tokens well under the existing floor price. And that causes a spur of panic of basically every other holder. Meanwhile, someone in the know, I guess, can basically accumulate some of these fungible tokens at a deep discount, be it dog or pops or any of these tokens. So I think it's interesting. Yeah, curious, Matt, maybe if you can chime in from like the art side of things. Is if a transaction were to happen on Arch, is it an open market PSBT? Like, can it be mempool snipe? I guess I'm just curious to learning a little bit more about that from Arch's perspective, and I guess it kind of plays in nicely to what Saturn is aiming to build as well with the DEX.
Yeah, no, like by default, like RBF is not possible to do through Arch because technically, like we use this first, we take the transaction ordering directly from Bitcoin, and the execution environment basically takes that first in, first out as gospel, and once that gets executed on the network, it then creates these outputs so that ultimately this new transaction is only able to be submitted by the Verifier network. It really can't be front run by anybody because they don't really know what those data inputs really are. You can't really reverse engineer what those inputs are. So just as a general feature of the platform, you can't really mempool snipe what's happening or what's being executed on by the network.
Got it. That makes sense to me. I mean, I think that creates a much more healthy dynamic where people can actually buy what they intended to buy. And I think there was just a lot of FUD around this with Magic Eden, for example, and it kind of pushed them into a direction of creating, I forget what they call it, but it's like mempool protection service or something along those lines, where it bumps your fee rate to appropriate amounts to prevent something like this happening. I know Robert just joined, who's I guess been quite a big trader of these assets. I guess how do you see the landscape of mempool sniping? I think there's two camps. My personal view is anything in the mempool is fair game. It's just how transactions work. When your transaction hasn't closed, it's not confirmed, so it's kind of fair play to anyone to RBF the transaction. But I know historically speaking, not all miners supported RBF transactions. I think that has changed or is changing. Yeah, just curious as to what the RBF landscape is these days with miners.
Yeah.
RBF is a CIA psyop.
So RBF, firstly, and hello everyone. I literally just joined, so didn't catch the previous conversation here. But for context, full RBF acceptance this year from miners has gone up dramatically, and this is like all quite technical stuff. But basically, miners allow for sniping now, and they previously didn't last year. But my thesis on this has actually changed. Like I've always been in the camp that until it settles on the blockchain, the blockchain is law, right? Very much adhere to that. But I think people don't appreciate that mempool sniping, like sniping an ordinal, sniping someone's rune, like that's the tip of the iceberg. When collections are about to move very quickly, you're gonna have smart market makers, smart sellers, smart buyers, like cancel their order if the price moves up. So like your sale isn't guaranteed. Let's say even if we
like fix the kind of whole sniping thing on L1 just for purchasing ordinals, right? It will never prevent the seller from canceling that order if we lean into self-sovereignty of assets being held, right? There's always going to be this dynamic in the mempool on the L1 side specifically, right? Like, and obviously if we move all the assets to an L2, like runes, ordinals, move them over to like fractal or something like that, then these problems get solved. Or any of the others, I'm not discriminating at all, but yeah, like moving to an L2 is the only way to like have assets move hands faster than Bitcoin's block constraints allow, right? Or we just say, yeah, everything's getting put into a opcat address and kind of solve the problem that way, or trade on a centralized basis. So like right now, if you want to keep your runes and ordinals in your own address, you've got to play ball and lean into the fact that your assets are, it's going to be chaos from assets moving around your wallets.
That's actually a really interesting take because previously we haven't necessarily seen many sellers actually cancel their transactions, which caused the fury of, massive, I guess, fees to these miners themselves. So I guess when you have the ability to cancel these transactions or cancel your sales, that changes the game dramatically because now it gives back control to the person that was actually selling their assets. Interesting. Chad, you wanted to chat about this. I know you have a different take of.
Yeah, I mean, I think RBF is one of the worst things that ever happened to Bitcoin. If you read Satoshi Nakamoto's light paper, it's peer-to-peer currency, and what kind of financial system allows you to take someone else's transaction and replace it with your own? Literally makes no sense whatsoever. Again, in the current construction of Bitcoin, it's a part of the game, so it is fair game, and I don't think it's like the absolute worst thing in the world, but it's a super annoying feature on Bitcoin for ordinals and rune stuff. It's a fucking nightmare for the users. And yeah, I mean, again, like the implementation of RBF, I highly recommend people look into it because it is, it's again, literally basically destroyed Bitcoin in one fell swoop. Like at least destroyed Bitcoin's potential to be used as money, right? That's why we have this digital gold narrative now, is because, now Bitcoin can't compete with the US dollar. It never will compete with the US dollar because you can literally just take someone else's transaction out of the mempool. So yeah, again, I don't particularly subscribe to the theory that Bitcoin needs to replace the US dollar, but RBF was, in my opinion, a CIA
I guess
psyop to
I
destroy.
guess wanted to elaborate more on that one too. From my understanding, you can't necessarily steal someone's Bitcoin transfer. You can only accelerate it, right? So you can only get the Bitcoin into the most nearest block or the next block as as you accelerate their transaction. So wanted to maybe if you can elaborate on that, like why you're super against it from like a Bitcoin transfer perspective, because I think most people understand how it flows into PSBTs and transactions of ordinals and runes, but maybe less so on the actual Bitcoin transfers. Curious to learn a little bit more about that.
Well, again, like, I don't want to be labeled. I'm not, just to preface, because in talking about any of this stuff, I don't want to be labeled as a BSVer because I'm not in any way a BSVer. But the original design of Bitcoin did have zero conf transactions, which means that as soon as you submit a transaction to the mempool, it's a guarantee that your transaction is going to go through. So again, Bitcoin in its form back then was supposed to be this replacement for money, right? So it was supposed to be this like alternative network for like fiat currency. Obviously, that's not what it is today, but like, but that's because of implementation of things like RBF, which again, like, allows for me to replace your transaction. It's not to steal your money, but I get to jump your spot in the block basically. I can cancel your transaction pretty much. So
Wait, so sorry to
that
butt in,
again,
but
that
just to clarify,
design is pretty antithetical to Bitcoin's original design.
it's RBF with
But again,
PSBTs
like,
that allow you
it
to,
just
to
it
snipe
in my
transactions.
opinion, it just sort of is what it is. I mean, I don't have like a super strong take because there's nothing you can do about it now.
Bitcoin is too big to
Miners do
fail.
have a lot. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. Right. So there's nothing you can really do about it now. But it's a total nightmare, especially in the ordinals world. Again, like it really only bothers me in the ordinals. It bothers me philosophically, but and on it from a user end, it really only bothers me from the perspective of like I'm trying to buy a fucking token, which already sucks on Bitcoin as it is. Like I tried to buy the Pubs token on BRC20 a million times. I got a bunch of trades in, but I missed entry like 5 different times and wasted a shit ton of money because or at least a shit ton of time, I guess I should say, trying to buy the fucking Pubs token on BRC20, because my transactions just kept getting fucking sniped,
Yeah,
man.
but what's interesting
I
here
was
is
so
like
pissed off.
this isn't a whole new
So
concept.
yeah, again, like
But Chad, can
if
you
you're
hear us or are
a
you just
user, I
going
mean,
turbo?
obviously you have Mev on something like Ethereum or Solana, but yeah.
All
Hey,
right,
Chad,
Chad, you got
I
to do
don't
a
know if
lap,
you can
bud.
hear us.
You got to go do a lap.
Oh, I'm so
You're going
sorry.
turbo.
I my bad.
Chad
No
is
worries,
king
no
of
worries.
I
rugs.
couldn't hear
No,
anybody.
but I think what's interesting here is this isn't a new concept. I mean, Jared from Subway was sandwiching and doing a lot of these things on Ethereum. And it's just now that the 10-minute block time is introduced, it kind of just opens this opportunity. I guess because it is that, like, that's what markets are made out of, is arbitrage. But there are some really interesting elements here that this is a super interesting topic because, you know, it it is really a blocker for a lot of AMMs. So yeah, but Jared from Subway just got 10-minute block time, so now everyone can be that guy.
Dude, yes, that is a huge part of this programmability stuff on Bitcoin is like, how are you going to prevent Jared from having 10 minutes to literally set up his entire bots to just get all of the free money? I do want to say that like specifically in the design of transaction ordering, um, with OpNet, we try to get away a little bit from the miners having total control of MEV by using a priority fee system. So basically, like when you send your transaction on chain, you send the normal sats per VB, which you can send let's say 100 sats per VB, but then you also have a priority fee attached. So if you send a transaction with 1 priority fee and 100 sats per VB, and then somebody else makes a transaction with 10 sats per VB but 100 priority fee, as long as those 2 transactions confirm in the same block, then the priority, basically whoever has the higher priority fee is who will get processed first, which allows, which sorry takes away from the fact that miners can just reorg the transactions in a block and then put their MEV snipers right before transactions with high slippage. So we want, try and get away from that because that's going to be a totally new thing on Bitcoin. MEV, the closest thing we have right now is RBF, which really only matters with PSBTs right now. So it's going to be the Wild West.
Yeah, I guess that's the other part too, is like Mev on other chains looks a very bit different because you're able to order transactions in and out within the same block, whereas Mev on Bitcoin is really just trying to buy something at a discount and then hoping that it sells in the next block, right? Like it's a different game that we're playing. Yeah, Robert, I don't know if you had anything else to say about the whole Mev on Bitcoin world and RBF.
Yeah, but yeah, so this is why I just respectfully disagree with Chad's take here. Like RBF ultimately gives control to everyone to be able to kind of reorder in a block, right? Or at least makes it like a fair auction. Like RBF already would exist from the miners, right? Like miners could essentially just dictate how they want to order transactions or which ones to not or do include, right? Like they already had this capability, but RBF just makes it a free market instead of the miners having full control. At least we can bribe the miners now to influence the block ordering, and that's why it's not ideal. I do feel the pain of everyone here that it makes AMMs and other things, like just the overall trading experience, very different than what we've seen before. It basically gives like a human interface into MEV that we've never seen before in any other chain. It is frustrating, but ultimately, show me the incentive, show me the outcome, right? And that, I think this really is one of those things, and why RBF is just net better than not having it.
Yeah, and I
Excellent
remember I
point,
think
sir.
reading something in Bitcoin Talk from Satoshi talking about RBF and versus like zero confirmation transactions, and the struggle I think that was mentioned is zero confirmation transactions are just horribly, complex to keep track of, because you basically can have Bitcoin that can be stuck in perpetuity forever. And I don't think anybody would really want that, right? You want your Bitcoin to be usable, ideally as quickly as possible, but in a lot of cases in life, you don't necessarily need it in the next 10 minutes. One would argue that we all need money immediately, and in a world that looks very different if you do have frictionless high speed transfers of monetary assets. But I guess that's kind of why we have Solana and L2 and future L2s, right?
Yeah, I guess it's super interesting. It does democratize the MEV attack to a certain degree because, before it's like the stock market. If you needed to be really close, like to be able to get all those sales in very quickly, efficiently, and only the high top traders, like people that wrote the sophisticated scripts to do MEV attacks, could do that. Now it kind of opens that up, which I think introduces, market manipulation, but also can balance it to some degree to like arrive at a much fairer price if no one wants to pay that. So I guess putting both of those up, and Robert, you've been doing a lot of research on this. Like, which one do you think would arrive at um, first, or not first, but like in the long term? Would it arrive at prices? Because like for collections, it becomes, you know, if something gets sniped really low, the fees, someone will only pay a certain amount of fees until it reaches the floor price. But with an AMM, I'm just curious of your thoughts. Do you think it's long-term positive, or do you think it just introduces insane arbitrage and just market manipulation?
Yeah, I mean, I think if assets continue to trade on the L1, which I think the liquidity is here, that could change in the future. But as long as on the L1 and the tooling for MEV gets better, miners are going to be printing money. I mean, it's really that simple. If you want to buy, you need to pay up to miners to beat everyone else that is attempting to buy
And
to
see,
make
that's
them
a
hard.
net positive. That's what keeps our network spam filtered and, like that's but then it reduces a lot of the use cases too, which is interesting. It's similar to why ETH had to go to, Optimism Arbitrum because even providing LP became pretty strenuous, which is I don't know, there's a lot of factors here that really make this way more complicated than it needs to be. We're just trying to trade some shit coins.
Well, look, like we have the ability to bridge ordinals and runes to L2s like Merlin. We have Ordinal Hive, which is a marketplace for ordinals, and I believe fungibles on Merlin. And the fact of the matter is, no one is really willing to bridge over those assets to another chain. I mean, that is just something that people don't want to do. I think the
Well, I
security
think
that
it's
you
pretty
have,
subconscious. Like bridging
yeah.
has led to terrible things. Like look at where like bridging inherently is just it for technical people. It's like, oh yeah, this car would be much faster if it was flying in space, and like, but no, like I don't know. It just I don't know if bridging is really ever gonna do what we hope. I don't know. I don't know. That's a very tough one because Wrap BTC is one of the biggest assets like that. Um, really activated a lot of like tooling on Ethereum, but I don't know. That's a deep one.
I mean,
It's
yeah.
going to be really fascinating to see again like how this really plays out. I mean, I think that if anyone's alpha hunting, I think whoever offers a Flashbots-esque service on Bitcoin, I think will be those types of tooling will become extremely valuable over the course of the next coming cycle, especially as more programmability gets introduced to the Bitcoin layer 1. There's going to be an instant need for you know, sniping protection, etc. Right, like things that allow for people to not be so vulnerable to RBF. And I don't know of any specific projects, but I do know there's a few that are developing services like this. And yeah, I think those are going to be super high value projects that come about. And so yeah, I mean, we'll see it all develop. It's going to be really, really interesting. And yeah, nobody wants to, on that note about Merlin, nobody wants to use Merlin chain because Merlin chain isn't even a Bitcoin L2. It's literally a Polygon. It's like a Polygon edge, like ZK chain. It's like, well,
A
how is that
scam,
even?
pure scam.
Yeah, I mean,
Dude,
yeah,
when
yeah, I
when
agree.
when
Yeah, that's
L2 pumped up fun, just like, all right, we're launching another L2. Me and Farmer Joe, and then there's like a Canva on top of it. It generates a little image, latest meme, and it's like just fucking that's who's gonna spin that up?
Bunzi, actually,
you could raise some money for that for
it's
Dude,
sure. I
I
mean,
can raise some
VCs
money
are.
off fucking saying like 12 buzzwords and making a WordPress site.
it's actually super funny that you bring up this L2 as a service because I was talking to the BVM team. So if you guys don't know them, I believe their first kind of product was called Trustless Computer, and that was probably early last year. Then they had Alpha, which was the friend tech of Bitcoin. And now they're basically providing rollups as a service. Obviously, I think that's pretty interesting. Nonetheless, it's funny that it is something that we've talked about. Bunzi is like, let's just create a rollup as a service for every single L2. But the theme of the matter is that a lot of these, I guess, builders on Ethereum now they're moving away from building on any sort of L1 or even L2, but moving towards their own rollups. So Arbitrum has Orbits, which Conduit is able to spin up for these dApps and create a dApp chain for basically every single DeFi application.
Yeah.
And obviously that's an example of like horizontal based scaling solutions where now every single application you use on Arbitrum is basically running its own rollup, with to Arbitrum, which then rolls up to Ethereum. But it's kind of funny sometimes where Ethereum is just trying to create, or rather recreate, what Solana has today. Um, and
Damn,
it's
shots fired. That was pretty sick.
no, apparently Vitalik no longer has a girlfriend, so the revenge arc is gonna be pretty beautiful. So
Dude,
here.
ETH to the
devs
moon.
with no girlfriends or recently broken up with are fire. Full cracked. No, but I mean, that's just ironic though. It's like, okay, let's move towards a decentralized, truly decentralized network. We know the liquidity sits on Bitcoin because of that security layer. And then we sacrifice that farther and farther and farther for these, roll ups. If there's money to be made in colluding, in like reorging and doing these things, like until we arrive at that truly, truly sophisticated technology that is like inherently like SHA 256 of the fucking 2069 whatever, like the just a very high, like we're all computer scientists agree on it, quantum computing, all that bullshit. Like I just don't put my money on all these side roll-ups, and then it just fractionalizes LP too. So I think the problem that we're solving here is massive with like focusing on layer one Bitcoin. You know, yes, there's a lot of limitations to it, but with limitations bring creativity. And a lot of these, look at how many projects are on this stage, like how much brain power each one of us has, looked at this whole spectrum of things, and we are circling it. We really are, I think. And it's gonna come with trade-offs, but I just hate to see a decentralized, like, true North Star keep getting fractionalized. And in my opinion, it's kind of extreme, but once you have that like 1% of vulnerability, like might as well just go to AWS then. Like it's 100% or nothing situation
Might,
because,
might, might as well go to Web2, aka McDonald's, right?
dude, well, I mean, we're already there after that dip. But
And
like,
Casey currently has been locked into a video game for the past 54 hours, so we may actually be going to zero here.
see, that's yeah. Satoshi, where's he at? Dude, at the moment something moves from Satoshi's wallet too is something that's like not talked about enough. Like if that dude just Like, I don't know. That's an interesting one. But
If the dev rugs, you mean? I don't
dude,
know.
that's literally yeah. It's so funny. Like
Bitcoin, no, as funny as it is, like Bitcoin is the best meme coin of
it
all time.
it
It
is
is the meme
100%.
coin of the financial system.
He's
If
just
you
the
really
dev
think
that
about it.
hasn't rugged yet. Like
Hey man,
imagine,
Dev is a good trader. That's bullish.
Dev is dead. Bullish.
dude, didn't some like fucking project on ETH do that? They like launched, sold out, and they're like, dude, sorry to tell everyone, he died. Like,
Yeah, that was pretty
dude, and that
wild.
I read that, I was like, holy shit, Satoshi did it first, bro.
I wanna let Saturn chime in, and I think it's Hex behind the mic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly touch on what Bungie was saying because I think that's one of the most relevant points at the moment. Like, I think if you look at why ETH is really struggling at the minute, it's not because they're lacking in scaling solutions. There's like too many, I think this was like the big debate about like BRC20s and runes initially. It was like, okay, we're just splitting everything down the middle. Um, I think as well, like you look at the Merlin valuation, which I believe is like 800 million. There's like another just layer two, like just traditional layer two bridge Bitcoin that is also just raised as well. And like we know firsthand that a lot of these funds have been absolutely blown up by like these L2s just collapsing. And that's a big issue. Like it's a big branding issue for us as well. Like so, I think like that's kind of why I'm super bullish on these base layer smart contract execution solves because if we can centralize all of the builder attention, all the liquidity onto one asset class, I think we stand a much better chance of surviving. But yeah, I mean, like VC capital is now sparse as a result of making 10, 15 different Bitcoin layer twos. And I think that's probably been the biggest crux of Bitcoin this cycle. I think without all of that money going into just random L2s that did nothing, I think we'd be months ahead of where we are.
Yeah, totally
Well,
agree. I mean, the fact is that most of these VCs aren't backing the teams that are actually building on the L1, but rather backing infrastructure solutions. And I kind of understand where they're coming from. That there's a larger upside in many cases for that to be the case. But, I'm of the view that if you win on the L1, then you can win on any of the scaling solutions thereafter because, I think most of the scaling solutions are supposed to be solving for the problems of the L1 users and not just solving for just building an L2 that is running on an optimism fork and then calling themselves an L2. And a lot of these L2s up until recently haven't necessarily even been compatible with Bitcoin based assets. I think a lot of these L2s don't have a runes bridge, they don't have an ordinals bridge. So, is it really an L2 if all you can get is, basically wrapped Bitcoin as the dominant
the
DeFi
issue is like
currency?
really all points back to the UTXO model is just really, really tough. Like it inherently makes anything dynamic like just a bitch to work with. It's like it's the dollar bill is the best example. Like I know we kind of get really deep in these spaces and that's like the goal of, really highlighting and diving into it but just for explanation for some listeners, like UTXOs are kind of like just cash. So say you have $100 bill and you want to buy something. You have to, go to the cash register, send that UTXO, aka $100 bill, and say I see some ice cream over there. I have to wait to get my change until I go buy that ice cream. But say I had two $50 bills, I can be like, yo, I want to buy this and that ice cream, same block, same time. Where account models like Solana and Ethereum, that's like one of the key things they solve for. So
It's like debit
inherent,
cards.
yeah, it's a way of pooling. We're all trying to, we're trying to just really create Dex pools, pool party summer. But yeah, it's I don't know. That's really I think going to be one of the most inherently difficult things. As I've been working on this since Domo wrote that white paper, and with OmniSat we got it onto testnet, and the tech is cute now at this point. It was novel and innovative, but really the difficult problem, because swapping is one thing, like getting assets to hit something, but building a sophisticated capital efficient market with a UTXO model and 10-minute block times is is a fucking 40 chess
Well,
puzzle that
sir, this
that
is
is.
exactly why we're gonna have SlowFi, right?
But
Well, account-based models are going to dominate on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's kind of what
I
I
I
wanted to
agree.
that's what I want to raise my hand for is like
I agree.
the beauty of these meta protocols. I feel like the term L2 was kind of used and adopted a little bit too early because the concept of a meta protocol is really what to me makes sense as like an L2 definition. But the beauty of these L2 sorry, these meta protocols is they can all exist like Fractal is a L2 for Bitcoin. It's a scaling solution for Bitcoin. I don't know if it's
I really like the fractal approach with the merge mining. I
dude,
think it
it's
just
sick.
I think it just hits like the Bitcoin maximalist like is also another thing to address here is like the ethos is like we are kind of in our own bubble. Like and that's simply because we do care about the, you know, the decentralization and security that Bitcoin provides that these other chains have sacrificed. But Fractal with merge mining in a similar approach where you can still use, you know, signatures and PSBTs and, you know, use some of these op returns. It's basically BSV the way it should be.
Dude,
It's like,
It's literally BSV on
yeah,
Bitcoin. It's
it's
fucking
well, it's,
sick.
yeah, it's exactly that. It's, you know, without Craig left or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Fucking, and I don't know. I'm super bullish on it. Has anyone started building on it? Because I've been messing around with Harry a bit.
We've messed around with the test net a little bit, and I mean it has like Taproot built into it. It's literally just a fork of Bitcoin with a couple of
Dude, it's a
the
fork of BSV.
yeah.
It's 30-second blood. It's
Literally.
like it's dank. Like BSV actually like it's kind of a bummer, but I do think it was trying to do too much of its own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that this playing its role and allowing Bitcoin Core to highlight where it's like reigns supreme and will always reign supreme. Um, but man, Fractal, dude, China #1 is looking pretty sick.
Dude, Fractal's sick, and the fact that meta protocols pretty much are like they're not their own blockchain, so they work on any other. Like if you look at ordinals, ordinals exists in some way, shape, or form on all of the Bitcoin forks. So it's a really cool space to be in right now, where there's people trying to make
Yeah.
scaling solutions to Bitcoin, and you can just kind of plot if your thing works on Bitcoin, and the scaling solution is a fork of Bitcoin or any kind of UTXO model, you can just pretty much plop your meta protocol onto that and continue working on that. So yeah, I think Fractal will be kind of the first example where we see people really putting, specifically BRC20, runes tokens. We'll have opnet on there as well. I'm sure Arch will be on there as well. It'll be really cool to see like the crossover from the main net into a scaling solution. Yeah, very bullish Fractal.
I'm fractionally bullish.
All right,
Um,
all right. The other conversation that I wanted to get into, like, let's just say we finally get into a world where going back a little bit, like, sniping is no longer a thing, and everyone is guaranteed their transactions. What exactly is MEV on Bitcoin going to look like? That is, a question that I'm just trying to wrap my head around, and then, I'm also trying to wrap my head around all of these meta protocols, which, seem to be like they're competing against one another. If yeah, they all try and design their own token standards. They're all trying to design their own application layers and indexing solutions and so forth. But, like, I guess let's start with the first thing. Like, what the heck is MEV on Bitcoin going to look like? I don't know, Robert. Do you have a view of, like, what this could look like after, OpCat, after, Arch prevents mempool sniping solutions, or if we have mass cancellations? Like, I wish I had the guys from Rebar in here to talk about this a little bit more. I met them at Bitcoin Nashville, and they seem to be working on an interesting solution, kind of gathering a lot of the miners together to create, what I think is basically a way to have non-standard transactions pass for a specific fee. But yeah, Robert, I wanted to get your take. What is MEV on Bitcoin going to look like after we no longer have sniping? Let's just say 6 months to a year down the line.
Well, first we need to bring some actual value being moved around on the L1 back. These days, it doesn't seem like there's much money moving around. But after that, I mean, as the motor swap guys have been saying here, it really does require like just more functionality, like on the sort of smart contract side, like whether that's through Arch or other solutions. I'm not really sure if I have a super strong thesis other than like miners will probably get paid if there's money flowing around on Bitcoin L1, right? That's what's gonna like bring back this sort of like MEV action that we saw from March of this year, when in some cases miners were getting tens of thousands of dollars of extra fees per block for sniping activities or whatnot.
Got it. And I mean, contrary to popular belief, MEV is actually quite healthy for, a
Dude,
sustainable
100%.
ecosystem. I mean, the most amount of MEV, I think I read something, a couple weeks ago where it says that there is more MEV on Solana than there is at this point on Ethereum, which
Do you
is
know why that is?
speed, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
Meme
yeah,
coins.
no, it's literally cost of transactions. You can, like, Solana is built for this type of bot system. Like 90% of transactions that are at least profitable are ran by bots. So, MEV is insanely high on Solana. That's what was a key factor in it flipping DEX volume on Ethereum. Like, and that's very interesting because that's not going to occur on Bitcoin, or at least at that strategy or approach. But yeah, like MEV is the market that we play in. That is, we're all trying to price arbitrage, but like scripts are just more efficient, and they, even some of the most profitable bots are pegging the most boring things, pegging ETH to a stable coin. Like if there's a few cents arbitrage, dude, guess what the fuck they're doing? Like that is where the money's actually being made in these environments. And it's very interesting to replicate a model like that onto Bitcoin, where the fees just really throw a huge in the block times, throw a huge wrench in that whole um, current, I guess you would say, flow for MEV.
Dude, I think that like this is literally the core of SlowFi is like we pretty much all know what DeFi looks like in a fast environment. Like that the entire game of the past 2-3 years has been making chains faster and cheaper. So everybody knows exactly what DeFi looks like on the fastest environment, and what that looks like is people trading meme coins and then bots committing a shit ton of MEV because yeah, it costs them a fraction of a penny to complete the Arbonne stuff. So yeah, Jared Jared has a real good time on Subway because you can make those 1 penny profit MEV snipes and still be
What happens
committing.
when you get the 10-minute footlong though?
Exactly. We literally just don't know. Like we're writing. We are in the part right before Bitcoin has DeFi abilities, and so this lo-fi stuff is gonna just it's completely new territory for the whole market, which is why I think there will be a lot of interest in it because it's kind of boring if you're trying to like find DeFi strategies on fast blockchains right now. Everybody knows you just have to have the most optimized thing versus it when you open it up on a SlowFi environment, it's like this is already guaranteed to not be optimal for what
Dude, the
people.
boomers. This is the fucking boomer fi, dude. It's just like, wait, no, we got a few more minutes to think about it, Joe.
It's gonna be sick. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, the other okay, so let's switch to the topic of like meta protocols clearly enable DeFi on Bitcoin, but we're having this influx of multiple meta protocols. I know Glitter is becoming its own meta protocol. We have OpNet. We have many others. Tap obviously kind of being the first adjacent meta protocol. I get someone that just requested maybe they want to chime in. I don't know who exactly this is, but random boy. Yeah, if you had a take on meta protocols and I guess how do we get into an environment where these meta protocols are not necessarily competing against one another, but actually offering greater interoperability with what we currently have on the L1. Like a lot of these meta protocols need you to wrap your tokens into the meta protocol itself. Then you have, other meta protocols which are saying, look, like we're just not going to be compatible with runes at all.
Dynamite song tutorial.
Dude, I totally agree. Damn.
Yeah,
So
finally.
we figured it out. Dude. Oh my, you get that, Robert? You write that down?
What a great question for such a retarded response.
Yeah, I mean, how do we get into a world where we don't have 17 token standards on Bitcoin and yeah, like
See,
something.
that's huge because just like we complain about fractionalizing liquidity, we're like, all the liquidity is here at Bitcoin. It's like, actually, bud, they
Yeah,
all
we're
have some
doing we're
weird.
doing it the exact same way. Rather we're all claiming to be an L1 meta
Yeah.
protocol rather than saying, yeah,
Yeah,
we're
it's
just building
LARP
our own LP.
central, dude. It's fucking LARP central. Everyone's like, they all use the thesis of like, okay, all the liquidity is on Bitcoin, but check out our token standard. It's like, all right, you're missing the whole point here because if the liquidity is here, it's now then fractionalized with all these that are not interoperable. And now you have a whole different ecosystem, and that addressable liquidity that you're talking about and using like Bitcoin as an anchor is just completely obsolete.
Yeah, and I mean, Magic Eden doesn't have a BRC20 marketplace. They're just runes. So just imagine Magic Eden or any of the runes marketplaces that we use today supporting net new meta protocols. There's just going to be, that. I mean, it's a challenge, right? Like, curious as to how this will all really work. Like, how are meta protocols going to be interoperable with one another? Are we just going to have like a layer zero meta protocol that creates interoperability between everything? Like, I mean, it's a serious question, right?
That's a good point. I think obviously interoperability between meta protocols is going to be a major narrative as more and more programmable opportunities and meta protocols emerge. But I do also on the same hand, I do think it's going to be somewhat of a zero sum game, and the dust will settle. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in a year or so from now, I think the dust will settle, and whoever brings the most amount. I think a couple of things. One, the best user experience, something that's most native to Bitcoin, and also, of course, like the best dev experience as well. If you can bring all of those things to the table, then and also, I guess, who can create the most value in the protocol in the applications that are built on these programmable meta protocols? Because the whole idea behind having a programmable meta protocol is you're trying to encourage app development on Bitcoin. So who attracts the best applications that offer the best user experience, that can attract the most liquidity? I do think it's somewhat of a zero sum game for these meta protocols, and obviously we've thrown our hat into the ring with our approach. And again, I think that only really time will tell. I do think, yeah, like Bunzi said it, or I don't know if Farmer Joe said it, but yeah, this layer zero interoperability sort of thing. Again, there's going to be a lot of opportunity, I think, for people to build stuff like that. But yeah, I do think long term, who's ever token standard and meta protocol does it the best is just inevitably going to win. I mean, obviously Casey had like a leg up with Runes being the creator of ordinals, but he didn't make Runes to be good at all if you're trying to do anything that isn't just listing tokens like NFTs. So it's like I mean, Runes will inevitably fall by the wayside, especially because he has no interest in bringing programmability to it. So
But
it's
but
like
Chad,
there will be new
Chad,
standards.
for example, like I guess we're kind of seeing like what will happen because a lot of these meta protocols are starting to become VC backed and so forth. And so when a meta protocol seems to be successful, they're going to go down the route of fractal and build their own L2. Like that isn't necessarily a non-zero event for a lot of these meta protocols because if you can attract the most programmability and gather a user base and be very close to Bitcoin, then you're arguably the largest upside that you have as a dev team is to just build your own L2, and then it's going to become much easier when you have opcat and so forth. But
That that's a great point. That's a really good point. And again, I think that especially on the protocol level, especially on the meta protocol level, and bringing functionality and programmability to Bitcoin itself, I think that VC involvement and VC funding, I think, is actually a somewhat of a net negative because it requires you to create this new, whether it's a gas token or a governance token or whatever. that gives value to the VC investors. And again, like the ordinals really succeeded because there is no VC, there is no other token, there's nothing you need to do except just make Bitcoin transactions to use ordinals, and it's a free to use and open source thing. And again, there is no profit incentive for Casey to build the ordinal client, and that's really why it succeeded. And again, like, not to just shill our thing, but that we follow that exact sort of ethos. Like, there is no profit incentive for us to build OpNet. There is no extra gas token. It literally just uses Bitcoin. So again, I think approaches like that, whether it's our thing or something else, stuff that stays true to Bitcoin layer one will be the dominant meta protocols. And again, like as far as speaking to the L2 thing, people who are on Bitcoin, like the whole point of all of us playing on Bitcoin, the whole narrative surrounding Bitcoin is based on, well, all of these Bitcoiners, they never move to ETH because they think ETH is an L2, and they never move to anywhere else, and anyone who would have did wrap Bitcoin, which has only 1% of the Bitcoin token supply in it. So all those Bitcoiners, that's this wealth of liquidity that is in every single pitch deck for every single L2 and every single everything, right? All the grifts. How do you actually tap into that? These guys aren't wanting to move to L2, so you have to give the best experience on Bitcoin layer one. And then again, yes, there will be some amount of people that might want to move to an L2, but yeah, if the L2 is the end game for a meta protocol, I think that it's inherently going to have a lesser amount of adoption, especially from people who just hold Bitcoin, because again, these guys are somewhat religious about the Bitcoin blockchain. Moving to an L2 is you're dead in the water when it comes to attracting liquidity from these guys right away. You have to give people a way to earn some sort of yield natively on Bitcoin L1, be able to enable decentralized lending markets directly on Bitcoin L1, allow for Bitcoin issued stable coins to have a lot of functionality directly on L1. And again, there's a lot of positives that stuff like that can come from stuff like that. So I think that's really the future I kind of hope emerges, and I think that's really what's going to
So
happen.
I agree with a lot of your takes, and definitely agree that the only bags that are pumped when a meta protocol goes down the L2 route is the VC bags and possibly the tokens that the team is very happy to dump thereafter, and it creates you know I I guess Casey is here simply because he's made it off Bitcoin anyways. He's just trying to do something cool. He's doesn't seem to be a character that is financially motivated. And in a lot of ways, many people that are building open source tooling are not necessarily financially motivated. They're actually trying to do, a net positive in this world. But yeah, I mean, I don't think runes are going to zero or going to be sidelined just because he's been playing a game for the last 56 hours straight. Um, with that being said, Bitcoin is at 60K. It seems like there's been, a huge amount of news around the XRP settlement for securities fraud and so forth. So they got slapped on the wrist with a $125 million fine on Ripple. But yeah, it looks good for Bitcoin itself. The Burr machine is back, and Bitcoin. Oh, okay, well, it's no longer at 60K. 59.8. Close enough. Close
Oh,
enough.
you're fucking up my bags.
Well,
Who
just remember,
dunks?
all of your runes and
Robert?
ordinals are priced in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin goes up, you're, by default. In
Your
if you care about the stuff.
546 sats gets a little bit more expensive.
Yeah. The other part. Yeah. Meta protocol side. I know Nick is in the audience. Who's building Glitter. Obviously, curious to what he would say on meta protocols and everything that they're working on. Yeah, Nick, if you want to jump up as a speaker, let me know. But if you're tied up, yeah, it's cool too. Yeah, Bunzi. What else is new, sir?
I'm down to just keep ignoring Saturn. What about you?
Oh yeah.
No, Saturn, what up?
X. Sorry, my bad, man. Yeah, go ahead.
All good, all good. I'm gonna jump out in a second anyway, but just going back to the point on like competitiveness, like there's two elements to that. Like one, I think competitiveness is somewhat of a good thing in these early stages. I think that's going to breed better innovation. So it's like kind of a let the best product thing. I think more than anything, what we build needs to be useful, and it doesn't want to just be like more virtue signaling. Like we really try to force BRC20s to work before we put our hands up and be like, you know what, this is actually really annoying. And secondly, I think like we need to consider like what kind of assets are really going to be traded on Bitcoin. I mean, like deep in assets obviously are not going to be traded on Bitcoin. Memes is a difficult thing to justify to say that's going to be being built on Bitcoin. However, I think like the two really useful things that we can come out of this, like in this true SloFi narrative, is DeFi, so trustless lending of Bitcoin, and actual stables, so being able to de-risk from Bitcoin whilst also remaining on the chain and contributing to sustainable mining. So I think like once you kind of achieve those two things, I think then we can kind of scale out on from there. But yeah, I mean, I'm still of the opinion that I don't think the standard is as important as what is the underlying asset that that standard represents. I think that's more of an awkward question. But yeah, I'll leave that with you guys, and I gotta run off.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, Hex, for coming up here and chatting more about like the Dex environment and everything Saturn is working towards as well, and some of the takes on the Bitcoin side. The other part that I wanted to kind of it's been a topic on my mind at least. Whereas like on Bitcoin L1 and this whole infrastructure that we're building, it seems like Bitcoin is basically the only financial asset that we can spend. Be it runes, be it ordinals. Do you guys think that that's going to change over time? Like, because runes are close to Bitcoin, but not necessarily the same as Bitcoin, will we ever reach a point where we start to spend our runes in the same way that we're going to be spending our Bitcoin? Or do we build an infrastructure on this layer that basically has Bitcoin as the de facto dollar of the whole chain from start to finish?
Am I rugging, or was that just a horrible question?
Damn, I guess no one else
No,
has
I
thought
just
about
think
that one.
Farmer like answered his
Wait,
own question sort of like in the like the pre-explanation of the question where he's like these runes are kind of like these Bitcoin but not really, and we already are seeing stable coins being minted on runes. There's going to be different types of tokens like we see on other marketplaces or other ecosystems, I should say, that resemble other fungible tokens. So whether or not runes is like the ultimately end adopted standard, universal standard of Bitcoin, I think is the main question. But yeah, of course, I think that there's going to be other tokens that get spent in the same way that Bitcoin does. It's just which standard is it going to be on?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of fair because I'm just trying to think about it conceptually. On Solana, most of your transactions are denominated in Sol, and Sol becomes the currency of that chain. On Ethereum, most things are priced in ETH. So I guess it does make sense for most things on Bitcoin, from like marketplaces and so forth, to all be priced in Bitcoin itself. Obviously, looking forward to like Bitcoin denominated liquidity pools for these runes, but that's obviously something that is probably going to come after September. Um, the other part too is yeah, there's a couple other advancements on like the CatVM side. I know Udi just made an announcement that he hired Carmen from Unity to help build Bitcoin scaling, and I think that's actually the first time that Udi has mentioned Bitcoin scaling alongside OpCat itself. So curious. Yeah, I don't necessarily know how that's gonna work, but I think we're all of the view that OpCat may be 6 months away, maybe 4 months away, maybe even a year out, and we're all kind of here to build, and solve for the problems of today. Um, yeah, I mean, curious of what you guys are thinking about like OpCat. What when yeah, I guess the question is always like, how do these soft forks even get approved on Bitcoin? Like, there is no real governance to Bitcoin. Um,
miners.
is it though? I actually don't know too much about this. I don't know if anyone
I
can.
see Amin in the audience. Like he studies and memorizes bit proposals for fun, so maybe he has some perspective here.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to add in like how does a typical bit proposal get approved, and who?
Yeah, first, like someone needs to come up with the proposal, like a very well written proposal, and submit it to like the Bitcoin GitHub, and then like they need to start like rallying around it. So trying to get like mindshare and get these developers talking about it, which Udi and the Taproot Wizards team have been doing a great job of that. And like once like there's like a little bit of social consensus, they start thinking about like the ways they can implement it and if there's like better ways to do it. And yeah, like once we go through all that process, like an implementation is proposed to be like actually sort forked into Bitcoin. Yeah, it's a process of like social consensus between developers, miners, users, all the stakeholders basically.
So I guess
And
that
and I mean, like for those who don't really truly understand OpCat or this proposal, this isn't something that is new. This has been proposed before, and it's been in queue for a while. So like, what is it, and when did it originate?
Well, Opcat wasn't proposed. It was actually like part of the initial version that Satoshi pushed into Bitcoin, but there wasn't like the separate limit, so he had to like remove it as well as like these long lists of opcodes. But like now after the taproot upgrade, we have like these limits around how much data you can put inside the taproot scripts. So it's definitely safe to be added again. Also, like so people think there's like a little bit of misconception about like taproot. A lot of people are saying that like you can do like programmable stuff. You can do it's basically like just a subset of computation. If you really think about computation, computation is just data manipulation at the end. Like if you think about computers, just reading data, writing data, and manipulating data. So like concatenating thing, which OpCat does, is a subset of computation that can be done, and only a subset, a very small subset of programs that could be possible to do can be done using data concatenation. But like still, like even with OpCat soft fork, there are still like a big field of computation that can't be done on Bitcoin.
I guess I mean like does OpCat play into what Arch is building, or does it make anything that you're building better, easier, faster, more dynamic? I'm just kind of curious as to how you're viewing this.
Yeah, of course, it definitely like makes our lives as Arch, especially like the devs, a lot more easier. Like right now we're doing a lot of like workarounds to basically do like this functionality. It should definitely help our like the use case that we're trying to provide. Yeah.
And it's sort of like offloads consensus, I guess, to this now native feature of Bitcoin, as opposed to trusting the verifier network to reach consensus. Um, yeah, right. Is that accurate? I mean,
Well, that's like debatable. We've seen like people who are it definitely can do that. Like after Opcat, you'd be able to do like ZK proofs on chain, but like we've seen the articles going around like the cost of doing that. So that's also an issue,
But there,
I
I
guess.
mean, there's this. So I looked into this a little bit with my best friend called Chat GPT to help me learn about ZK proofs a little bit and compression. But there's this like new, I guess, challenging ZK element where it's like recursive ZK, which allows you to basically have the proof in just a couple bytes, I believe, or something along those lines. Um, we haven't necessarily seen recursive ZK proofs yet, if I'm not mistaken, or it's still like a topic of research that is uh, getting kind of studied by Starknet or Starkware and others.
I think the ZK proofs are more like verifying like ZK proofs inside like other programs that are using ZK proofs. It's not like a matter of like compressing data.
So basically, the ZK proofs are using ZK proofs to use ZK proofs.
No, so like if you had to do like a cross-program invocation. So basically in Ethereum you could call like programs from within programs. You would basically like need to verify the ZK proof inside the proven of the first ZK proof. I don't know
Got
if
it.
that made sense.
Got it. I think I get it. It's not just ZK proof compression per se. I see. Yeah, no, makes sense. Yeah, I guess the last part of the show for the last like 20 minutes or so, just kind of all hands. Anybody that wants to speak up, can come up and we can just kind of end the show off there over the next 10 or 20 minutes.
And then we can all connect async offline and, go ahead and build an L2 pumped up fun release.
I
And
guess
then just check your Zoom.
that's one thing that I'm like still wrapping my head around is does a pumped up fund model even work on Bitcoin?
Actually, that's like the only thing that the pre-mine introduces. Like pre-mine, in my opinion, wrecked runes. It was why people moved from other networks to participate in fungible tokens on Bitcoin was the radical transparency and the fairness of a token launch. That has always been monopolized and geared towards certain players. And uh, a token launch where, if the miners get your transactions and you pay the highest fee, you get said token. But I really think allowing teams to pull a portion of a token just really deleted runes of being like a from like a degen standpoint. People will say stable coins, say teams need this and that, but if we really break it down, why is Solana thriving? These are just high frequency casino um, speculation tools. That's what they are. Some the other ones are just vaporware with a better sales pitch. But essentially, look at 2021, all the token charts. They have a spike and they just tail to zero. Um, and runes being poised as the casino, allowing teams to just take allocations, um, brought us back to all the vaporware, in my opinion. But
yeah,
that's a pretty harsh take. But
maybe, but I mean, I'm of the view that if you're creating a token standard, you want it to be as modular and flexible for not only just meme coins use case, which ultimately was Casey's aim, but I think deep down inside he designed a token standard that can be one day used for something else.
it's not even programmable. It's like it's
Yeah, yeah, I know.
it's like we want to like I'm just playing devil's advocate here. It's like I agree. I think there's merit and there's use cases, but those use cases are so small and proven not to really sustain elsewhere in a very practical way. Where BRC20s, the people were like, holy, this token launch is fair. I can see what's going on. Yes, the tools were limited, which also, you know, might have not made it seem as fair. But if the team has conviction in their own token, can't they pay the miners?
I think the reason KC didn't make runes programmable is because he just like deeply hates MEV, which I deeply disagree with. Like for example, if like you talk to these Solana validators, like the majority of these people are making their profits from MEV revenues. It's not even comparable with the fees that people are paying. So I think like enabling miners to also get MEV revenue would make like the Bitcoin network more stronger.
I mean, I 100% agree with that. There was actually a couple times or a couple days over the last year where I believe the MEV or the fee, priority RBF transaction fees exceeded the rewards for the block in many times. And I mean, this is just the reality that we're facing, and I think people don't necessarily, understand that eventually the Bitcoin network has to be self-sustaining. The emissions and the block reward is going to go to zero over time, and if we don't necessarily, create financial incentives for miners themselves, then this goes, Bitcoin genuinely goes to zero, primarily because then there's really no incentive to do anything with Bitcoin, and it just becomes a ghost chain at that point. Obviously, I'm of the opinion that Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and it's far too important for anyone from Ethereum, Solana, and other chains to really ignore. It's really what started everything. And I think a lot of people and a lot of users and Bitcoin holders are here primarily because, this is kind of what started it all. They believe that, we can get it to a point where we can build on Bitcoin and even on top and settle on Bitcoin. I think eventually that would be an exciting place to be, and we can finally use Bitcoin as the dominant asset for most on-chain transactions, whether those happen on L2 or an app chain and so forth. I think most people and myself would be far more comfortable with using Bitcoin over Ethereum or Solana. I think that's like one of the most frustrating parts about using Solana for me is the fact that I need Sol to make transactions, not only to buy things, but to pay the fees and so forth. So if we can just do that with Bitcoin directly, I think to me that's just a much cleaner implementation of what Web3 and blockchain should look like. But obviously, we're dealing with a chain that is like a dinosaur as a byproduct of that. So um, it's a complicated medium, but it's a complicated medium to build on. But I think the upside for anyone that solves these problems is immensely valuable, especially because there is just so much Bitcoin to unlock from like a use case perspective. And I was actually talking to someone that used to work at BlackRock, and he was saying that most people actually there's a huge amount of population in this world that owns Bitcoin and doesn't necessarily own Ethereum, Solana, and other assets. And when you can bring them an environment that they can use it, maybe it's not JPEGs, maybe it's not meme coins that they want to use their Bitcoin for, but maybe it's a stable coin that they want to borrow against it and utilize in various functions and so forth. Maybe that's the world that we eventually go through. But I think we're obviously very early in what the world on Bitcoin really looks like. But we all have a view of the direction by solving problems of the users today.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. Like when ordinals first came about, the value prop was clear, like data storage on and in Bitcoin, where Ethereum, a lot of these collectibles were, it was the other way around. Like the data, or on Bitcoin, the data is on chain, but the metadata is off chain. But on Ethereum, it was like the metadata is on chain and the assets are off chain. You know, this is, there's a few exceptions to this, but a majority of collections follow these same like guidelines, I guess, if you will. But I guess we've proven like product market fit for a lot of these other use cases, but like it's crazy to think like, do some of these, does it make sense to come back? I do think so, but it is like a really, really big question to look at. And like, I do think Solana just becomes the like perfect L2 for Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree. Solana's a fantastic chain that works usually. I mean, yeah, it has some downtime, but that has actually not happened in a very long time. So obviously, that's net
They
positive
put
for.
some duct tape around the cord. They
Yeah, I mean,
taped it closer to the wall.
Solana still says that they're in beta. So to have $60 billion of in beta access
That's
is
like they're
pretty
like,
wild.
no, dude, we didn't rug you. Like, didn't you read on the bottom of the site? We're in beta, sir. Like,
Yeah,
dude,
the terms and conditions before you buy Solana. Yeah, I think I mentioned that.
is anyone officially released anywhere? Or is like,
No, I don't. I actually have no idea. They probably
that's
have it
funny.
somewhere on their website that they're not responsible for anything happening on the chain. That you agree that it's in beta and so forth. You know what's crazy, Bunzi? I was on a flight to Bitcoin Nashville, and I was sitting beside someone who owns a Bitcoin ATM business, and he absolutely hates ordinals and runes. He's just like, this thing just ruined Bitcoin. It ruined my business. The fees are so much higher. And then he had the audacity to say, yeah, like your ordinals are not even on Bitcoin. They're just sats. And I'm like, dude, if you run a full node, these files are stored on your Bitcoin node. Yeah, it's pretty crazy as to how many people are just fundamentally opposed to ordinals and runes still. Obviously, we had Luke Dash Jr. And other kind of Bitcoin OGs oppose ordinals and runes, and all development on the L1 itself. But I think the political tensions and the tensions with Bitcoin maxis actually have not come around as frequently anymore as they were, and I think they just accepted the fact that we own the chain.
Yeah, it's just like one of the, it's short-sighted thinking. It's like, so where's the value lie? The value lies in the network. What incentivizes the network? Fees. Who is thrilled about ordinals and this actually people transacting and using it? Some of them will LARP like Ocean and say, we fucking hate it. But you better believe that, they have machines that are running this that aren't in their pool or whatever. And they're making, you know, and that's the incentive model that this whole thing is built off of. So when you zoom out, it's not people aren't buying coffee with your ATM machine yet, sir. And I would explore lightning and things like that. But I mean, disruption and chaos brings attention, and that's basically the key factor here. And we have a lot of it. I think there's so many dedicated teams, and what makes me bullish is like people are building here for a clear reason, where people build on other chains for an incentive that VCs like say, hey, we'll give you X amount. Please build some tooling on our fucking ghost chain. We really want to pump fake TVL and pretend that like we're really important. So build these apps and we'll pay you. That's not happening here. It's like people are genuinely seeing the value proposition. They're dedicating their time, their resources, and building these things out. So like long term, it's the safest to stay closest to Bitcoin. But you know, it's the biggest thing is what we're solving for on the DeFi side is this thesis of Bitcoin is the way because it has the deepest liquidity. But in action, we're fractionalizing it over and over again with different L2 solutions, different token standards, things like that. So, I mean, that is like the elephant in the room that like no one really wants to talk about because everyone's going in those directions. But whoever lands on that very efficient, very practical and social consensus really is going to win and pave the way for like years to come. But right now it's experimental phase and it's super cool to see how people are addressing it.
Yeah, I think you're totally spot on with that, and Bit Wolverine, I'll let you just jump in right after this. Like, you're totally right on that. Like the moment in time that where we're at in Bitcoin today is this. We're back at like an experimental stage, much like we were with BRC20s and some of the meta protocols at that point in time, where we're all just trying to figure out and problem solve for, what is the next unlock, what is the next piece that really gets the social consensus, before maybe you have broader adoption to what that next unlock really is, be it Arch or Opcat and many of the others. Even runes was one of those things where there was a lot of negative consensus around it versus BRC20, but I think we finally got to a point where there's arguably more adoption to developers and runes tool or runes products and runes interoperability than there is BRC20. But yeah, what that next unlock is, or what that next part of like social consensus is, I think is a big question mark. But it's kind of why we're here today and we do these spaces.
Bars.
I think that something that I do want to point out, not to be a contrarian, even though I usually am, but I feel we kind of forget that we are building on the shoulder of giants here, and we need to respect that. I don't think that a lot of people have just given into the idea that ordinals and runes and so on are a thing. I think that they've mostly just agreed to not care because we don't represent a significant enough threat to them. But as the ecosystem grows, that will change. And these are people that have fought wars before and have won them, and that they are very powerful political creatures. So I wouldn't underestimate them, because it will be at our own peril. On
Yeah,
the other hand,
agree.
I do believe that the purpose of a system is what it does, and right now Bitcoin is doing this, so they can also suck it. It's what it is.
Yeah, no.
And I think,
Yeah.
and on a final note, just because I got off a call right now, and I was just thinking about what you were saying, Farmer, about what the next unlock is. And I genuinely think that it's going to be around Rune's upgrading to a different model. Not necessarily a different model, but changing its capabilities to allow like permission minting, for example, so you don't have to do it all in one go. I think that that's the next logical step.
Are
Uh,
you gonna put a gun to Casey's head to make him do that? Because he's not gonna do it.
I would never condone violence, just to be super clear. Um, but I'm not so sure that he wouldn't do it, man. I just got off a call
He's
with.
publicly said he doesn't want any runes with any utility, and he seems pretty against upgrading the protocol for any level of programmability. Doesn't seem to be in his playbook. That's what he's publicly said. So unless he's lying publicly and secretly psyoping everybody, I don't see that being a possibility. Again, I would love
People can
to
change their
hopium all the
mind. They
way
don't
to the
have to be
moon.
lying.
Well, again, hey, I would love to hopium all the way to the moon, but again, people did this with BRC20s last year, and look what happened. Nothing.
I don't
So,
know,
and they
dude.
even publicly
I
said
mean,
they wanted to
BRC
upgrade.
20 still
BRC25
is
bite.
pretty. Dude, BRC 20s is pretty dominant still, and it directly in relation to runes.
And that, I don't want to speak for Domo, but I believe he had a very similar view on um, permission minting. And now there is a version of BRC20s that allows for it, the 5 byte
Well, it's a
version.
totally different meta protocol, really. Like BRC25 ticker is not the same as BRC24 ticker. There's no interoperability between them.
There's no interoperability between them, but that doesn't mean that it's not hosted on the same repo.
Well,
Like it
sorry,
has the
the way
brand name.
yeah, it has the brand name because Domo and the L1F have supported it. But from what I understand, the back end of BRC20 to be is basically Unisat built out a lot of infrastructure for indexing BRC20 way back starting in March of last year. And then Best in Slot made an indexer, which is kind of like the leading Western indexer. So a lot of the Western companies tend to use this indexer. And then that Best in Slot indexer turned into what's called the OPI now, which the OPI added support for these 5 ticker BRC20s as well, seeming to be in preparation for an upgrade in some kind of way for either, the modular system or for the swap function, things like that. While at the same time they were working on that, Unisat on their own infrastructure made their BRC20 swap module with the black and white, entry and exit points into the system. But BRC20 5 ticker only exists on the OPI end of things, and Unisat has their own version of BRC20. This is where the conflict over the 4 ticker world kind of exists. Is technically 5 ticker BRC20 could have any number of updates pushed to it because the only people indexing that are the OPI, which everybody's pretty much on the same page, versus 4 ticker BRC20s are basically everybody's arguing over what do we do because too many entities have too many different interests in pushing any one first upgrade. So
Okay. On the
I, I,
back of
I
that,
would
really
also
quick,
jump in and
yeah,
I
yeah,
just
All
want
right.
to
Well,
yeah, please,
highlight
Bunzy's got the inside info on this.
on the. I just want to preface the. If you zoom out, look at what was just mapped out, and that is 100% how things are working. And think about how Fractal is going to introduce this. Simply,
yes, sir.
yeah. So from a macro standpoint of this market, for the traders, builders, like we've seen, we're past the honeymoon phase of ordinals to some degree. The realization's hitting people in the face, and they're like, "Oh shit, this is slow, this is clunky," and the innovation and the VCs missing that big window is closing rapidly. And they're like, "Wait a second, this isn't what you promised. You can't." So what I'm getting at is the people that have been in the trenches, like Best in Slot, Unisat leading the way, building the wallet that everyone forked, and basically building the market. Like they are so deeply rooted that people don't really, really, really understand. And Fractal, I think, and knowing their involvement with BRC20, I would just say re-examine that whole ecosystem with a fresher, non-biased approach, because runes, you know, they got past their honeymoon phase as well. So now this is a tough market to really analyze, but now we have data points and not so much this like runes are going to go to wherever. No, we actually know where runes are going to go to some degree. We have some, you know, uh, grounding data for it. But just to wrap that all up, Unisat, huge player, BRC20s in that realm, fractals coming. I mean, do with
Yeah.
that information what you
Could,
will.
Bro, wait, sorry.
couldn't agree more. And also, I just think that we should, this is what I really hope happens, is we should move away from, especially with Arch Network and obviously OpNet and other programmable solutions that are just obviously better than Runes in a lot of ways. I think we should move away from the uh, hey guys, let's just hope and pray something happens with this token standard that just fixes everything magically. It's like, I understand like not being technical. I'm not even really a technical guy myself, but like there's a difference between huffing an insane amount of hopium and copium about the bags that you have versus like living in reality, especially when people are putting forth actual programmable solutions, everything that you possibly could have dreamed of in your fantasy world where Casey just becomes a different person and decides to do things the way that you want him to. That's just not what's going to happen. Again, like, let's live in reality here. Runes is not going to just have some magic upgrade. In fact, there are people like the guy who did Proto Runes who, again, he's put out solutions. There are other people who have suggested and implemented programmable runes standards, and Casey doesn't want to do it. Like, he's
I
not
don't
going
know.
to do it. He would
Dude,
have done it if.
like, I would just, I feel you. I think it's, you make a great point that Casey does have a very high authority, which is a contradiction of what we strive for in these types of ecosystems. I think that's completely valid. But saying he won't do anything is, you know, people said Domo wouldn't do anything, and that's about to change too. So it's like,
Well,
it,
Domo doesn't have like a philosophical aversion to DeFi and smart contracts, right? Like Casey is on record publicly stating he doesn't like smart contracts and he doesn't like DeFi. So it's like, again, Domo is one guy. Domo has publicly said that he's tried his best to upgrade BRC20. So, I just think there's a big character difference between someone like Domo and people who are trying to work for solutions and someone like Casey, who again, he made runes, so he gets to do it with it what he wants to do. But again, living in the fantasy land that he's just gonna wake up one day
well,
and be like,
Raph
actually,
is the lead
I
maintainer,
wanna.
so Raph has spoken pretty. Like, I don't know. I do think that you make really good points. I mean, we don't know where things are going to go, and that's what's super cool. Honestly, is like creativity comes out of restrictions. Like, have you ever sat in a room like you can do whatever you want, and it's like, all right, well then, what the fuck do I do? So, I mean, since we started this space, the market is up turbo. So, like, you're welcome. I mean, clearly not sexy. Like, DeFi talk is working. So, just tip Farmer Joe and like, hey, or uh, what else? BRC20s that are gonna go to zero. Maybe we make a.
Farmer Joe deployed capital.
Yeah, he did. He was fucking like bullish on vaporware. He went to a conference and was like, "Well, that panel, they're really saying something." Um, but no, this has been a great space. Like, I guess let's get Robert. What's some alpha? You've been lurking up there. You're reading charts. Let's end this with some value and then wrap this piece up.
Honestly, I'm in the shower right now, so I'm gonna leave it to you boys to round us
Bro,
out.
hell yeah.
Dude, Robert's got his cock out right
Damn,
now.
Yeah,
very
that is
cool.
that is one committed dev. Shower spaces. All right, guys. No, appreciate everyone that just joined. Obviously, still bullish on Bitcoin, still bullish on DeFi on Bitcoin, and the broader programmability on L1. Thanks for joining, and Bunzi, hit it with that outro song.
I don't have it up
Oh,
right now,
damn. All right.
so
Well,
awkward. No,
we're
I
go-
have an edit that I actually made it remix for Violetta. We played it when Control, we did the pull up at Nashville. And so shout out Control. And oh, this is not it. Wow, that was hectic. Let's run that back. But this is an edit. Shout out Violetta. Shout out Control. Original Bunzy remix. Love to see it. Nope, it's not playing. No, dude, it's not supposed to happen.
I
All right. Catch you
I
guys
got you. I
next
got you.
time. Take it
Uh,
easy.
I can play you guys
No,
out.
I got
Ready?
this.
Never made it as a wise man. Couldn't cut it as a poor man stealing. Tired of living like a blind man.
Dude, that was actually way better. All right. Love you guys.